Okay, all right, just waiting for everyone to join. And I think we have enough people already, 400 people already. Good morning and welcome to the first MEED webinar of 2026. I hope you all had a good end of 2025, had a good break and fully refreshed for the year ahead. My name is Edward James. I'm the head of content and research at MEED, and today I'll be giving a webinar on the topic of public-private partnerships, or PPPs, as they're better known, or even 3P. Today we'll be going over some of the major project developments in the PPP market in the region. Now, as ever, this presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube over the next couple of days once it's been edited, and you'll have a chance to watch it again or share with some of your friends and colleagues as well. You'll also be receiving a PDF copy of this presentation too, if you have registered for the presentation for the webinar with your email address. You will receive that shortly as well. And typical to the format of these webinars, I will be giving a presentation on the market for 30 to 40 minutes. And after that, I'll be taking some Q&A, some questions from you. If you do have any questions about the PPP projects market, then you can go to the Zoom menu bar and find the Q&A, question and answer box, and you can submit your questions there. And I'll do my best to answer them at the end of this presentation. Okay, let's go. So as ever, before we start, I just wanted to highlight to you our latest Premium Intelligence report, which is on the PPP projects market. It's called the PPP Projects Market 2026, looking at the GCC, Egypt and Iraq. So quite similar to the data and presentation that you're seeing today, but much, much longer, more comprehensive, much more data, and a complete reference tool for the PPP projects market in the region, in the GCC, Egypt and Iraq. We have a special offer for those of you in attendance today. You can see there is a code, webinar 600, the top left, which gives you a $600 discount as long as you order within the next week. If you want to find out more about the report, the table of contents and some sample pages, then simply take a photo of the QR code in the bottom right here, and you can go to the page where you get more details on it. I'll also take the opportunity while we're all here together to outline and give you some information about the Saudi Giga Projects 2026 event, which we have every year in Riyadh. This year will be in June 2026. It's going to be a fantastic event with most of the Giga Projects clients in attendance and speaking. It's a great opportunity to network with them and with other stakeholders in the projects market, and not just among the Giga Projects, but amongst the main government entities and private sector entities as well. I've been there for the last couple of years, and it's really the place to be if you're interested in the Saudi Arabia projects market. If you want to find more details about this, again, scan that QR code in front of you to get an idea about the program, the speakers, the agenda, as well as some of the other opportunities around workshops, networking and meetings and so on. Again, well worth attending if you have the opportunity. Okay, now let's move on to looking at 2025 as a whole. We are now in the first month of the year of 2026, so we can look at 2025 final numbers and see how the market performed. So, as of last week, the projects market in 2025 saw about $213 billion of contracts awarded. That's about $100 billion less than the figure for 2024. So there was a decline in overall contract awards last year, and that's obviously disappointing. But I think it's important to put that into context with the previous decade or so. So we know that in 2023 and 2024, there was a big uplift in spending. 2024 was a record year for overall contract awards, also in certain countries as well, like Saudi Arabia and UAE. But that fell last year. But that $213 billion is still, if you exclude 23 and 24, was still a record for project spending in the region, and far higher than the previous record of $170 billion in 2015. And overall, considerably higher than the average of $120 billion a year of signed contracts between 2016 and 2022. So yes, it was lower than the previous 2 years in 23 and 24, but still on a historical basis, far higher than those historical averages. So the market performed pretty well. We can also see from this data that actually most of that fall was in Saudi Arabia. A lot of talk, of course, about the decline in giga project spending last year, but actually we saw declines in Saudi Arabia across most sectors. So it's not really just attributable to the giga projects market, but across all spending in general across all sectors in the kingdom. On the other hand, we can see that Kuwait and Qatar actually grew on their 2024 numbers, and the UAE was fairly close to the 2024 number. Has been pretty consistent over the last 3 years, actually. And actually also overtook Saudi Arabia once again as the largest projects market in the region, spurred a lot by the continuing boom in the Dubai real estate market. So very much a mixed picture for 2025. Yes, the numbers fell, but primarily in Saudi Arabia, other markets performed actually quite well. Now here on this slide, I'm just taking a look at the sectors for project awards last year. You can see that almost every sector saw a decline in project spending. So it's not possible to say, oh, well, the decline was just in the construction market, or the decline was just in water, for example. No, the decline in project spending or contract awards last year was across most of those sectors. And again, particularly felt in Saudi Arabia. That said, construction remains the largest single project sector or projects market in the region, followed by the power market, transport and infrastructure, and then gas. All right, so that's the overall projects market for all sectors, all types of projects, including PPP. Now, for the rest of the presentation, we'll be looking at the PPP segment in particular. But before we do, quick question for you on the back of those last two slides. How was the GCC projects market performance for your company last year in 2025? Was it a lot better than 2024, a little better than 24, about the same, a little worse, or a lot worse than 2024? Let's get your views. And while you're doing that, just a reminder that this presentation is being recorded. You'll have an opportunity to watch it later in your own time, and you will also get a copy of this presentation in a PDF to your email, as long as you use that email to register for this webinar. So we've got 600 people online right now. We've got 300 or so responses. So again, very statistically relevant. And we have quite a very mixed picture here. So 15% of you say 2025 was a lot better than 2024. 27% of you say it was a little better than 2024. So what's that? That is 28 plus 15. So about 43% of you, just under half, say that 2025 was better than 2024. That's quite encouraging. And about the same, 49% of you say, 25% of you, a quarter, say it was about the same last year as 2024. Another quarter of you say it was a little worse in 2024, and 9% of you say it was a lot worse in 2024. So about 30% of you say it was worse last year than the year before, and about 43% of you say it was better and then 25% of you, the remainder, say it was about the same. So still quite a degree of optimism, and still the market seems to be performing fairly well. That's encouraging. Right, now let's look at the PPP projects market. First of all, I'm sure you all here are very familiar with PPPs, but just for those of you who don't, it's essentially, PPPs are essentially the government using the private sector to finance, build, take responsibility for operating and sometimes owning a project that would typically be delivered by the government, a service such as a school, a hospital, or a transport service, or power and water plants. So typically the government would provide those services, but with a PPP, the government would instead outsource that to the private sector, developers, to come along to bid for and then win the concession to finance, build, and operate a specific service or project over a long term, typically 20, 25, up to 30 years. So that's a public-private partnership. So instead of a ministry or government body implementing the project and then operating it, they're going to use a private sector instead. Now, there are various different models. I guess it's important not to maybe get too bogged down in these model types, but it's good to recognize them when people talk about it. You have BOO, which is build, own, operate. You have BOT, build, operate, transfer. They're probably the two most common ones in the Middle East. You also have BOOT, build, own, operate, transfer, BOLT, BTO, DBO, and so on. And some of them apply more frequently to some segments, others to other market segments. But they are all essentially different forms or models of the PPP model. So when you hear someone talking about a BOO or BOT, regardless of what they're described as, they are technically PPPs, or they are contract forms of PPPs. And indeed, as I mentioned, BOT, build, operate, transfer, and build, own, operate tend to be the two most common contract forms in the region. I guess they're self-explanatory. Build, the developer will come in and finance, and it will build the project, it will operate it over a certain amount of time, maybe 20 years, as I mentioned earlier. And then transfer, it will transfer it back to the government at the end of that concession period. So in return, for earning either revenues on that project or producing electricity or water, for example, the operator will receive fees or revenue from the government for providing that service each month or annually or even weekly. Now, I'll talk about the drivers in a little bit more detail in the next slide, but I wanted to talk or focus a little bit more about the unique characteristics of PPPs in the Middle East. So, one of the main challenges around developing PPPs is the risk. Now, let's say the demand risk in particular. Now, let's say a developer wants to produce build, or has been asked to build a power generation plant, electricity generating plant. Now, clearly, the demand for electricity in the region changes from a peak demand period during the summer, when AC demand is highest, to a much lower demand in the winter. Understanding what the demand is and how much electricity needs to produce and therefore sell is, of course, a demand or market demand risk for the PPP developer. So to rectify that and to make it more commercially viable and to reduce that risk, what the governments in the region historically have done is that they've guaranteed payments to the developer who has been financed and built and operated that power plant, desalination plant, by saying, regardless of how much electricity you produce, as long as you are producing the sufficient demand that is required of you, we will pay for that a set amount for that electricity, regardless of the demand. So the government is taking away that demand risk from you, and that has tended to be the model in the region, where the government has said we will guarantee the project with sovereign backing for any payments made from the government to the operator, and we will also guarantee that demand. That makes it much easier for the developers to come in and to be able to get finance from the banks to develop the project and operate it, as it gives everyone assurance that there's little demand risk. It basically means that these availability payments mean that the main risks on the developer, the PPP operator, is going to be in the construction and then the operations availability of the project. So that has typically been a way of getting these PPPs off the ground, where the government has essentially guaranteed that it will be able to make the payments to the developer over the terms of the duration of the concession. We've also seen over time that actually it's only in recent years that we have seen PPPs develop in sectors outside of power and water. Historically, and we'll look at this in more detail in a bit, it's really been only in power and water production that we've seen PPPs. But in the last 5 years, and the reason why a PPP market is suddenly becoming a lot more prevalent and people are talking about a lot more, is that PPPs have now been diversified into areas such as healthcare and education, where previously they were absent. So there's been this major trend over the last couple of years for PPP to extend it outside of power and water. We're also seeing a lot of Islamic finance now also entering into the PPP market, as we have generally with project finance. And we've also seen a lot of trends towards improving regulation and laws around the PPP framework. Now, just touching on that historical basis or historical trends or evolution of the PPP market in the region, we first saw the first PPPs really kicked off, well, first of all, with the Al Mana IPP in Oman. IPP stands for Independent Power Project. That was really the first PPP, major PPP in the GCC region. It was then followed up by the first IPPs or IWPPs in Abu Dhabi, Independent Water and Power Project, or Independent Water and Power Plant Project in Abu Dhabi. And these really started to kick off the trend to PPPs. And over time, almost all power and water desalination projects, power plants and water desalination projects were developed using the PPP framework. It took time for some markets to adopt them. Dubai and Kuwait didn't start launching their first PPPs until the late 2000s. But since then, the market has rapidly accelerated over time, to the extent that now it's very unusual to see a power water project to be developed on an EPC basis rather than PPP. So as I mentioned, in the last 5 years, following the development of proper regulations and laws, we've not started to see diversification of the PPP framework into sectors outside of power and water. We've seen over the last few years the first healthcare, first hospital PPP in Saudi Arabia. We've seen the first schools PPPs be successfully delivered and implemented in Qatar and in Saudi Arabia. And today we have PPPs in airports, in road projects, now for the first time in water storage and transmission projects as well. And we're starting to see PPPs in areas such as museums, street lighting, civic infrastructure, and so on. So now PPPs have a number of reference points. The market demand is much more well known and assured and quantified. We have much better regulatory and legal frameworks, and that's given everyone the confidence to be able to embark on the PPP model outside of that power and water sector for the first time. Just before I continue, feel free to join the Industrials MEED WhatsApp channel. Scan the code here if you want to join. It's a WhatsApp channel where every day or so a piece of news, breaking news, or poll or article feature comes out from MEED Global Data, and you can keep up to date with the latest news and market developments. It's a channel. It's a very unobtrusive channel. You get, as I said, you get an update once a day or so So feel free to scan that and join others in hearing the latest breaking news on the market. Right, now let's look at some of the details around the PPP projects market performance in general. Before I do, just a reminder that at the end of this webinar, we'll be doing a Q&A. So if you do have any questions about this presentation today or about the PPP market, please feel free to enter into the Q&A box on your Zoom bar any questions that you might have, and I'll attempt to answer them at the end of this presentation. Right, so I've gone through the fact that the PPP projects market is growing rapidly in the region now, in new sectors and in new markets. Why is that the case? Well, in the last couple of years, we've seen a big acceleration in projectivity and general expenditure by the state. But as spending increases, so does the strain on government budgets, particularly as oil prices fall. And so it makes perfect sense for governments to look at other ways of being able to develop their capital infrastructure. Using the private sector not only relieves that strain on government finances, but it also helps nurture and develop the private sector and to help them diversify. So it's a win-win from that perspective. You can get value for money and private sector expertise without affecting the government capex budget. So it is a win-win for everyone. So as government budgets or pressures on expenditure have increased, so too have governments seeking to deliver more and more projects on a PPP basis. As I mentioned earlier, you might have seen now every country has a regulatory and legal framework for the development of PPPs. Prior to 2003, 2004, most PPPs were developed on a contract model for each project. Now, of course, there are overarching PPP regulations governing the development of PPPs in each market, and that provides assurance to both developers and financial institutions which are financing the projects. Likewise, once you start getting reference points or successful delivery of PPPs in new sectors such as education and healthcare, it provides a lot more confidence that these can work, and that becomes a self-repeating exercise. So as soon as you have one first school develop PPP basis, then everyone has the confidence that you can develop more schools on that same basis. So once you've reached or breached that initial barrier, then it becomes much easier to develop those PPPs in that area. At the same time, there's a much better understanding of how PPPs are being delivered amongst government bodies and the private sector in general. Again, that provides that confidence that PPP market can work. And I think also lessons learned over the last few years is that in order for PPPs to work, there has to be a fair distribution of risk between government and developer. No more free governments now no longer see PPPs as a potential free project. They understand that in order for them to work, the demand risk has to be spread equally between the developer, or at least fairly between the developer and government client. I think as banks get more assurance about the PPP market, they're able to lend at lower rates, and that makes it easier to reach financial close and make these projects more competitive as well. And also statistical availability or statistics around demand data, whether that's for transport or for healthcare or schooling and so on, has improved. So again, all the necessary metrics are there, statistics are there, and data is there for PPPs to be successfully delivered. And we can see that data here in the rise of PPPs over the last 3 years. So as you see, between 2016 and 2022, we had between $4 and $10 billion of PPP projects awarded each year. All of that was essentially in the power and water market, very low risk, very assured market, lots of references and expertise there. And we saw anything between 14 and 40 projects. However, as you can see, a big acceleration in the number of projects awarded using the PPP model in the last 3 years. We jumped to $53 billion, 53 projects awarded PPP basis in 23, $34 billion worth of work awarded. And that in 2025 has increased further to $41.5 billion worth of PPP projects awarded, and that's some 56 individual projects as they diversify outside of power and water, and as the governments push the PPP model more aggressively. So there's one of the reasons why we are discussing PPP today is the fact that this is a major trend impacting the market now. A lot more projects on the PPP basis and a lot more companies being involved. Now, in terms of the size of the PPP market by country, we can see that really Saudi Arabia and UAE lead the way. These are the two biggest projects markets anyway, but they've also led the way in adoption of the PPP model. And indeed, if you look at Saudi Arabia, some $100 billion worth of contracts or PPP projects have been signed off over the last decade, and that's about $40 billion in the UAE, and then some $10 billion each in the other markets. In terms of that breakdown, well, again, as I mentioned, historically, most PPPs have been in the power and water market, and that's reflected here in this data. As you can see, $140 billion of the PPP market over the last 10 years has been in the power and water sector. But we've increasingly started to see that diversify into construction, industrial and gas, and also in infrastructure and transport. And that will grow as a percentage of overall PPP spending very much over the next few years. Here's just some of the projects, the PPP projects that have gone into this data over the last few years. You can see a lot of them are in that power water space, but also we've seen some port projects, we've seen some transmission projects, we've seen some giga project utilities packages, but the list historically is dominated by the power and water market, particularly in power production. As you can see, multi-billion-dollar projects, and Saudi Arabia has led the way really in some of those. In terms of the largest players, well, you have on the one side the clients who ultimately, the government bodies which ultimately tender the concession to developers to develop and own a project. And we can see we've got the SPPC in Saudi Arabia. They've been a major player in tendering the power projects in the kingdom. We've got the PIF, which has its own renewable energy program as well, directly procuring developers on its projects. EWEC in Abu Dhabi, the main water and power procurer there and off-taker. SWPC in Saudi Arabia on the water side, and Karama in Qatar, and Mazda, and so on. So these are the main government bodies responsible for procuring. And then on the developer side, you can see that the dominant player in certainly in power and water in the region in terms of projects under execution is, of course, Aqua Power, partly owned by the Saudi government, but is a major player globally now in power and water development. We also, as you can see, Mazda, SEC, its electricity company, has become a developer in its own right. Badil, which is another holding company of the government in Saudi Arabia. Aramco is taking equity stakes in PPPs as well, EDF, KEPCO, and so on. Because you can see there's a good mix of both international and regional companies in the PPP segment in the region. In terms of the contractors who are employed by the project developer to act as the EPC on these PPP projects, you can see SEPCO 3. In fact, you see a lot of Chinese contractors, SEPCO 3, Power China, China Energy, Power China, and so on. They figure very highly by virtue of the large number of solar PV PPP projects in the region. Chinese EPCs dominate the solar renewable projects market in the region, therefore tend to be the most active EPCs. But you can also see L&T, Larsen & Toubro, also very major EPC in renewable energy projects and power, gas thermal power projects as well. And then you have a list of very familiar companies like Technicas, Rines, TR, Mudlaq, Damuk, Al Khwairi on the water side, Doosan, Orascom out of Egypt, Acciona from Spain, and so on. So very typical list of EPCs, each of them working for the different developers to build the projects. Right, before we move on to the next segment of this presentation, let's get your know a little bit more about your company. Is your company actively engaging on PPP projects? Has it already delivered PPP projects? Is it looking to be engaged on PPP projects? And is it, or number three, is it not interested in PPP projects? So again, we've got some 300 responses so far, and 50% of you, just about the majority of you, are looking to be engaged on PPP projects. So you haven't actually engaged them yet, but you're looking to. 40% of you, more or less, are actively already engaged in PPPs, and about 10% of you are not interested in the PPP projects market. So it's interesting. So as obviously in keeping with the trend or growth in the PPP market, we're also seeing a large chunk of the market is now looking increasingly at the PPP market and some of the opportunities there, and looking to get involved in it as more and more projects are being procured on that PPP basis. Okay, now I'm going to go through some of the PPP projects themselves. Again, just a link, just a reminder that we're recording this and it will be uploaded to YouTube in the next couple of days. You'll be able to watch it again. And also, if you've registered for this webinar, you'll receive a PDF copy of this presentation to be able to, again, read it in your own time. And then just a final reminder that you have the opportunity to ask me some questions. Phil, if you have any questions, please stick them into the Q&A box and I'll try to answer them at the end of this session. Right, let's take a look at some a dozen or so active key PPPs right now. So this is the first ever stadium PPP in the MENA region. In fact, I think it might well be one of the first PPPs for stadiums globally. This is the Prince Faisal bin Fahad Sports City Stadium PPP. It's being designed to be open in time for the FIFA World Cup in Saudi Arabia in 2034. And this is going to be a 20 to 30 year concession for developer to come in, private sector to come in to finance, build, and then operate this new stadium, which will have a capacity of 47,000 seats over a period of 20 to 30 years. The client here is the Ministry of Sport alongside the NCP, which is the government body in Saudi Arabia responsible for the development of the PPP market in the kingdom. So this is a very interesting project. It's a DBFOM, Design, Build, Finance, Operate, Maintain project. And as you can see here, in terms of the scope, you have to build the project, finance it, manage it, operate it, make sure it's maintained. And in return for that, you will receive payments or revenues from the government. And here you get a little bit of an idea of the scope of the project. So it'd be very interesting to see what the developer market interest is for this project, but clearly a very important project and strategic as well for Saudi Arabia in light of the World Cup. So we'll see how that develops. Another PPP being implemented for the first time in the railway or metro market in the region is Q Express. Now, Q Express is a high-speed railway line running from King Salman International Airport to Qiddiya, the Qiddiya Giga project in Riyadh via King Abdullah Financial District metro station. So the objective is to deliver passengers or tourists arriving at the airport to deliver them quickly on a high-speed track all the way to Qiddiya for them to visit Qiddiya. So this is going to be developed on a PPP basis. It's being tendered by three entities: Qiddiya itself, by the NCP, and then also by the Royal Commission for Riyadh. Now, there's been plenty of interest in this project. 145 developers and contractors submitted expressions of interest for this project to the clients, and it will now move on to pre-qualification and then on to the issue of the RFP. The initial observations are that there is a lot of interest in this. There is appetite among developers for this project, despite their never having been a successful rail PPP or a rail PPP in the region. So that's very encouraging, also not just for this project, but also for future metro and rail projects, such as, for example, the ones in Mecca, also to be developed on that PPP basis. So if this works out, then we can expect to see a large number of other rail metro projects in future also be delivered on that PPP basis. So one which is going to be delivered on a PPP basis. Another project for the first time being delivered on a PPP basis is the Dubai Strategic Sewerage Tunnels project. This is the first, if I'm not mistaken, the first large-scale sewerage and wastewater collection project being done on that PPP basis. This is a massive project, $8 billion, I think, essentially replacing the aging existing Dubai sewerage network with a new gravity sewer system. Two basic geographical areas. One is Deira, which will collect all the wastewater from the Deira side of Dubai and take it to the Wasan wastewater treatment plant, which then will be extended. And on the other side, the Bur Dubai side will then have its own gravity sewer system, which will then take all the effluent to the Jabal Ali sewage treatment plant, which will also be extended. So these are being done, three major packages for the actual networks, the links, and the main sewage gravity tunnel. Those are going to be delivered on a PPP basis, and indeed already we've seen the developers and the contractors be qualified for that. And then, of course, two other packages to expand the sewage treatment projects themselves. So the RFPs are out for the three different packages, and we expect bids to be submitted by the developers for the concession to be submitted in the first half of this year. Lots and lots of interested developers and contractors, so there is the appetite amongst the market to deliver this on a PPP basis. And again, it's the first time this is being done in the region for this market segment. Staying with Dubai, Dubai, through the Department of Finance, has a list of maybe 20 PPPs which it is planning. The infrastructure ones you can see here. There's also projects like street lighting and some service provision, which I'm not including here. But in terms of greenfield or even brownfield infrastructure development, these are the main projects. The first big one is the Al Wasan waste to energy plant, which is obviously in Al Wasan. This is the waste management center there, $1.2 billion, the largest waste to energy plant in the region. This has been operational for a year or two now. It's a 39-year concession BOT basis. And that's really kicking off the pipeline for other PPPs to follow. Of course, Dubai has been doing through DEWA PPPs in power and desalination for quite a long time now, 10 years or so. But these are the first of the PPPs in these sort of new market segments. As you can see, we've got a new landfill, medical waste incinerator, a hospital, a couple of hospitals actually, 3 museums, even housing as well. And these are all going to be done on PPP basis. You get an idea of the contract model being employed on those, some BOT, some DBFOT, and so on. And also you can see the concession period. So Dubai now is also getting into the Act. Perhaps the development of the PPPs here has been a bit slower than originally expected, but still very much in the pipeline and still intended by the government here. So lots of exciting opportunities. I think one of the most important developments in the PPPs over the market, in the PPP market over the last 5-6 years or so, has been the first schools PPPs in the region. The first one, well, they both happened about the same time, were in Qatar and then also in Saudi Arabia. Both of them were guaranteed by the government in terms of the students to be provided for these schools, so that demand risk was taken out. Really, the risk here, or the developer proposition, is to build suitable facilities and then to maintain those facilities to a certain level to provide that education service to the government. So we've already seen the first wave in Saudi Arabia, 60 schools in Jeddah and Mecca. We've seen a second wave for 60 schools in Medina, all successfully completed and starting to be operated. And then likewise in Qatar, we had the first 8 schools were awarded in 2020 to Bara Real Estate Company, and the second phase for further 14 schools, and then a third phase. Now, the reason we're mentioning this is that there are more phases to come, particularly in Saudi Arabia. The Tatweer Buildings Company is the body responsible for tendering these projects, and so there are multiple more waves to come. Next one is in Riyadh, 110 schools, and then so on and so forth. So whether you're a developer or you're a contractor, a lot of opportunities there to come in and help deliver this programs. Sticking in Saudi Arabia, I mentioned earlier the NCP, that's the National Center for Privatization and PPP, the NCP, and this is by far and away the largest pipeline of PPPs in the region. It's got more than 200 of them. You can see, go to their website, you get an idea of what they are. It's already delivered several dozen. It's got several dozen underway currently, and it's got a long pipeline of future PPPs. Some of them are privatization, some of them are provisional services, management and operations, and some of them are new infrastructure as well. So what happens is the NCP is a joint client alongside the government body or ultimate owner of that project, which could be a ministry, could be a royal commission, it could be a holding company, and it works with them on the issuance of the solicitations of interest, and then onto the pre-qualification, and then the RFP. So it works alongside them. We did a webinar last year with the NCP. If you go onto YouTube, you'll be able to hear directly from the NCP about their plans and how they procure. But here we see a key list of the NCP PPP projects coming up in the kingdom. And you can see a very interesting list of some new emerging sectors. For example, the Asir Jizan road PPP. This will be the first major road PPP in the region that's now in the market. We've also, as we talked about, the Q Express. We've got SWPC, the Saudi Water Partnerships Company, and their water projects, the first reservoirs and transmission PPPs in the region. In fact, actually, we also did a presentation with them in early December. So again, if you want to hear about the SWPC's plan, again, go onto our YouTube channel and you'll learn more about them there as well. We've got the big airport PPPs in Saudi Arabia, Taif and Abha. Again, a lot of interest in those. They are underbidding right now. And we've got some more roads. We've got a hospital project in Al Assa. We've got faculty housing. We've got labor accommodation, and a large number of other PPPs all coming up in Saudi Arabia. So as you can see, a very strong short and long-term pipeline. This is just some of them. As I said, if you want to know more about the PPP program in Saudi Arabia, the long-term pipeline, just go to the NCP website and they provide you very good long-term visibility about some of those projects. Another really interesting PPP is, a potential PPP is the Salalah Thumrait rail line being handled by the Oman Logistics Center in southern Oman. Previously, Oman planned a project called the Salalah to Thumrait Truck Road PPP. That sadly didn't work out, and instead now there is decided that it'd be better served by building a dedicated rail line between the two cities and towns. This will be a 150 to 170 kilometer long rail line rising through the mountains, as you can see there, and then on to Thumrait. It'll be primarily delivering food, both refrigerated and dried food containers. We'll have some distribution hubs, stations as well. And the objective is that they'll kick off the procurement for this project this year, with the objective of having it completed by 2032. Oman obviously has been a leader or pioneer in power and water PPPs, and is looking to extend that. And this will be the first long distance rail rail line PPP in the region. So very interesting project indeed. And again, another novel one for the region. So that's a list of some of the key PPPs coming up. However, as we can see here, the majority will still be in that power and water market. Here you get an idea of some of those. As you can see, we have all sorts of large-scale projects in the OECB, the Iran, IPPs, IWPPs in Kuwait. We've got the battery energy storage systems with solar PV production plants as well. We've got in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE. But we've got a mix now compared with the historical list of projects. We've got a much more diversified list of projects. We've got data centers, we've got roadworks, we've got railway systems as well. We've got causeways. So we've got a much more diversified mix of PPPs going forward as we did, in much more diversified than those in the past. So as you can see, more than 300 major PPP projects coming up in that known pipeline. Now, in terms of that pipeline, which is more than $250 billion, we've got, again, just as we've got historically, we've got Saudi Arabia as the largest future PPP projects market, some $146 billion of known, planned, and unawarded PPP projects in the pipeline, some $60 billion in the UAE, $35 billion in Kuwait, and $30 billion in Oman, and so on. I know we would expect these to grow. Qatar, for example, is evaluating a long list of PPP projects, including the Shark Crossing project, a multi-billion-dollar project, sort of bridge tunnel across the bay in Doha. And Bahrain also is looking at the causeway and potentially also metro line as well on a PPP basis. So very exciting times, long list of interesting projects, and a fantastic opportunity for companies. In terms of the status of these projects, well, we've got a large number of projects currently in a short-term phase. We've got more than $20 billion of PPP projects in bid evaluation, where the developers have submitted their bids, their tariff rates. We then have another nearly $50 billion in tendering and in bidding. So there's a very strong long-term and short-term pipeline of projects. And then, as I mentioned earlier, yes, in terms of that pipeline, power and water still dominate. But unlike the previous decade, we've now got a long, strong pipeline of PPPs in other market segments. In transport infrastructure, whether that's railways, roads, or airports, we've got more than $40 billion of those types of PPP projects. In construction, like labor accommodation, for example, more than $20 billion. Petrochemicals, industrial projects, and so on. So a very active and increasingly diversified list of future PPP projects. Now, just before we finish, a final poll question, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. So, which PPP project sector do you believe offers the best opportunity going forward? We've got power, water, airports, rail, healthcare, education, roads, and other. Okay, we've got a clear winner here, power, as it has been historically. Most of you, 40% of you believe that that's going to offer the most opportunities. 20% of you say it's going to be water. 12% each for airports and railways. 4% for healthcare, 2% for education, 4% for roads, and 3% for other. So 60% of you say it's going to be power and water going to provide the biggest number and value of opportunities, which is correct. But then you have a quarter of you say it's going to be airports and railways, and another 7 to 10% of you saying it's going to be in other markets, including healthcare, education, and roads. So very interesting. Thank you very much for those responses there. Right, quick reminders, join our WhatsApp channel. There's the QR code. If you want some breaking news delivered to you once a day, some polls as well. It's very unobtrusive. I'm certainly get a lot of great info and data from it. So Join us on our WhatsApp channel, scan that, and you'll be given the option to join it. It's very straightforward, and receive some breaking news and market developments straight to your WhatsApp. And final poll question as ever. MEED, as you all know, is a business intelligence company. We offer a range of different services. MEED.com, our news features analysis service. MEED Projects, our projects database, projects tracking service. Our reports, like our PPP Projects Market report. Our events, like our Saudi Giga Projects Conference, and our marketing solutions business. If you are interested in any of these, please answer this quick query poll question, and we'll be happy to get in touch with you to discuss in more detail. Thank you very much for that. And while you're answering that, just a reminder, this webinar is being done in association with our launch of our PPP Projects Market report. It's more than 600 pages long. It covers all PPP projects in the GCC, Egypt, and Iraq, full of data, full of scope, contact details of the different clients and major developers, goes through the full regulatory system and legal system for PPPs in each market covered in this report. And if you're at all interested in the PPP market, either you're already active or you want to get into it, then this is very much worth purchasing and reading. Special discount for you, as you can see in the top left-hand corner. And then if you want to know more, see some sample pages, table of contents, scan on the bottom right-hand corner. A final reminder of our Saudi Giga Projects event. It's the big one. It's happening next June in Riyadh. I think it's going to be at the Roshan front. We're going to be hosted by one of the Giga Projects themselves, Roshan, in the north of Riyadh. It's a fantastic event. All the major Giga Project clients will be there. It's a great chance to network and meet them, as well as listen to their presentations on their procurement plans and project activity. If you want to find out more, get more information on the program and so forth, scan this QR code here. Right, let's go on to the Q&A. Right. So if you do have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box, and I will do my best to answer them if I can. Okay, first question. Are you foreseeing growing trend for PPPs in renewables like wind and solar and biomass? Well, I don't think it's a growing trend, because I think over the last 10, 15 years, almost all power and water desalination plants have been developed on a PPP basis. So I don't think there's anything unusual there. It's very rare these days to see a power plant or desalination plant or a sewage treatment plant being developed on anything other than a PPP. It's very low risk. The government guarantees the offtake, whether that's desalinated water or treated sewage or power. And so it's a very model that everyone is comfortable with. It's becoming increasingly competitive. Tariffs are dropping each year. So, and of course, most projects now are in the solar or renewable space. So that's definitely something that's well accepted now and is the norm rather than the exception. The areas where we are seeing PPPs in power and water for the first time are in transmission and in storage and reservoirs. This is particularly by the SWPC in Saudi Arabia. So it's diversifying into those segments, the midstream segments. But we're still not really seeing PPPs in the sort of distribution of potable water or sewage, treated sewage. Neither are we seeing PPPs in the T&D segment just yet, but that might well change over time. What is the largest PPP project by transaction size in the last 5 years? Well, I think I showed a slide of one of them, of the last biggest PPPs of the last few years. I think the project in Abu Dhabi, 5.2 gigawatts with battery energy storage solution system, I think it's the biggest PPP, more than $5 billion. We've also seen the massive Al Zour North PPP in Kuwait, for example, power and desalination plant. There's been so many. It really is based on the capacity of the desalination and power project, really. And the most anticipated project in the near future, well, I think I've gone through some of those. I think there's some really interesting ones. I think Taif Apa Airport, Q Express, the Dubai Sewage Strategic Tunnels, PPP as well. A lot of interest in those. A lot of interest in the PPPs outside of power and water, because many of them are being done for the first time. When do you expect pre-qualification process for Q Express to be issued? I think very soon. Clearly, the idea is for the Q Express to be ready for potentially for Expo in late 2030, and certainly for the World Cup in 2034. So in order for that to happen, really do have to proceed with that sooner rather than later. Is there an equivalent to NCP in UAE and Qatar? It's a very good question. Not as far as I'm aware. It depends on the sector. In the UAE, for example, if it's power and water, then it would be done by EWEC. If it's done in other sectors, then it might be by ADIO or some other entity. In the UAE, the Department of Finance has the overarching sort of responsibility, but each of the projects is going to be tendered individually by the relevant body. So it could be Dubai Municipality for sewage, for example, the DSST. It could be DWA if it's a power or desalination plant, and so on. And in Qatar, again, it depends on the segment. It could be Ashghal, for example, if it's the Shark Crossing, or sewage, like the Ruqair and Rakra sewage treatment plant project, or if it's in power and desalination, then it would be QX. So it really very much depends on the type of project. In Kuwait, however, you've got CAP, the Kuwait Authority for Public-Private Partnerships. This is the body responsible for tendering and procuring PPP projects, regardless of the sector. I've got questions about specific projects, which I will try and answer offline with you all, because I have to check. Do you think rail projects in the GCC PPP rail project GCC will be success, given that railway or mass transit projects globally haven't been viable? That's a very good point. So generally speaking, there are very few profitable railway metro networks globally. We've seen some of the challenges in the UK, for example, around private operations ownership of railway lines. And it's true that they're very difficult to make profitable. Certainly without government subsidies, they won't work. I think in the GCC, there is awareness of this. I think essentially that will be offset by government guarantees, so that the demand risk doesn't fall necessarily or entirely on the developer. So regardless of maybe traffic levels, there will be availability payments made by the government to the operator developer to make it commercially viable to be done on that PPP basis. So it won't be fully demand or falling solely on the developer, because that just wouldn't work, I don't think. There's a lack of data around demand for railways and metros generally, and for new projects. So to make it work, they would need to have these availability payments and guarantees. What are the prospects for PPP in the road sector? Well, the road sector PPP market has had a sort of tricky history. So one of the first PPPs in the region was for the Mafraq Guwaifat Highway in Abu Dhabi, which was launched maybe 12 years ago. It didn't succeed. It didn't work. And so the government's moved away from road PPPs for a while, but they've come back now with the Asir Jizan Highway, for example. There's a couple of other PPPs on the road market coming up. Again, I think following a re-evaluation of the demand risk, there is now a much more equitable share of that risk to make these projects work. So there is an appetite to make them work, as long as the risk is not too great. We've seen generally, regardless of the sector, that there are developers and contractors willing to implement these PPPs, and there are the financial institutions willing to finance them as well. So I'm equally optimistic about PPPs in the road sector also working out. What are your expectations regarding NEOM PPPs? Well, all of the giga projects, the off-grid ones, have used PPPs to develop their power, desalination, wastewater treatment, district cooling requirements. NEOM is no exception. We've seen it also in Red Sea Global, for example. But NEOM, of course, has had some challenges. I'm very skeptical now about the short-term viability of the line project, for example. I don't think that's going to proceed in its current form in the short term. Oxygen, on the other hand, Trojena are continuing to move. So any water PPPs associated with those, I think that they will continue. Healthcare is an untapped PPP sector in the region. Has it got a good potential big opportunity? Well, yes, we've seen the Al Nasser Hospital PPP in Saudi Arabia. It's the first PPP in healthcare in the region, and that has really opened the way for more PPPs coming up. We've got another one now coming up in Mecca under the NCP, as you saw earlier with infectious disease hospital in Dubai being planned on a PPP basis. So again, I think there is a very large good potential for the private sector to come in and help finance, deliver, and operate these hospital projects, with again the government guaranteeing the sort of either the demand or the revenues or the costs to the developer on an availability basis. So again, as long as the government is helping support that the sort of risk, then the developer interest will be there. So regarding financing, banking support, what are the major risks? Well, of course, financial institutions are always, before extending these large sums, are looking for the project to be, we'll be looking at things like that demand risk, the construction risk, the operational risk, and the government has done a lot over the last few years to make sure to try and, in the contracts and in the laws, to try and alleviate or mitigate some of that risk and make it as attractive as possible to developers and then to financiers. We haven't seen massive challenges in reaching financial close on these projects, including the ones which in those new sectors like healthcare and education. And again, that's because the government is essentially guaranteeing either the offtake or the ensuring that the operator or the developer will be paid regardless. So that when you have that assurance, then banks are keen to or are happy to step in. At the same time, of course, there are liquidity constraints, and just as we see with contractor finance, not all financial institutions will have unlimited amounts of cash to lend, and that has to be managed carefully, and the government has to work with the banking sector to support the financial institutions and ensure they've got enough capacity and liquidity to finance these projects. The latest update regarding the Jeddah Metro project. The Jeddah Metro project, I'm not sure if it's a PPP yet or not, but the latest news is that a tender has been issued for the Blue Line consultancy contract to design it, which is big news. Jeddah Metro has been around for a long time, the plans for that, but it's been on hold for also many years, just like the Mecca Metro project. But so the news that it's being tendered for design is a big step forward, a big market development. So that's very interesting. And the latest news as well, just today, is that the RTA in Dubai has issued the design consultancy tender for the Route 2020 extension from the Expo site to the new planned Al Maktoum International Airport. So that's 3 kilometers and 2 stations. So it's a smallish extension, but still very interesting because it indicates that Dubai is proceeding with its plans for the new airport and for their metro system there as well. So watch this space when it comes to railways and metros. Very exciting time. How do you see PPPs growing in the social infrastructure market? So I guess that's like healthcare and education and roads and so on. I think, yes, as we discussed, the basic theme of this presentation is that we're going to see more and more PPPs being introduced outside of power and water. So I'm very optimistic of that. Is solar requirement for off-grid or on-grid in PPP projects? Well, both. We've seen solar projects, PPPs for giga projects like Red Sea Global and Neon, which are both off-grid. But we're also seeing SPPC deliver massive on-grid power plants, solar PV. So it's a combination of both. Someone's commenting on my tie. Thank you very much. I'm glad you liked it. I always try my best. Are there any PPP success stories for golf courses or clubs or other sport clubs apart from soccer and stadiums? Not that I'm aware of, actually. There is privatization of sports teams and so on and clubs in the region. But something like a golf course, no, I don't believe so. I mean, generally, that would just be delivered by the private sector acquiring the land and delivering it purely on a sort of that basis rather than as a concession. And I'm not aware, looking at the pipelines of major sporting PPPs, other than the stadiums, of course. PPP in the Levant region, would be interested to cover this. Yes, certainly when I look at Iraq and when I look at Egypt and some other countries, definitely also seeing growth in the PPP market. For example, Iraq has looked at delivering the metros, its metro plans and railways on a PPP basis. Not so easy because obviously because of the geopolitical situation, there's reluctance amongst banks to finance these projects. So if they do, there's much higher premium on that, which makes it more expensive and less commercially viable. But certainly in Egypt, whether it's desalination or wastewater treatment, there's certainly been an increase in PPP activity there. In Jordan as well, PPPs and wastewater treatment and power too. So depending on the geopolitical situation, some of these markets, the PPPs are growing, but it's obviously harder to deliver them. Is increasing PPP projects a sign of government cash flow problems in the GCC? I don't necessarily think it's a sign of problems, but I think it's a sign of the government's looking at alternative ways of delivering projects off balance sheets. It makes sense for governments rather than having to extend or borrow $3 billion to build a power plant. If you can get the private sector to do that instead, it's a win-win because it helps grow the private sector and diversify the market, but it also means that you can spread that capex over a longer period of time rather than having to finance it yourself. And instead, the government can use that $3 billion for other purposes. So it makes a lot of sense for the governments to be able to diversify their procurement like this. Okay, question here about the DSST project. The project, just to clarify, doesn't actually cover stormwater drainage. So the DSST is purely for wastewater collection and then treatment. The stormwater drainage is actually being delivered under a separate program by the Dubai municipality called TASREEF. It's a huge program as well, but it's been implemented on a traditional EPC basis, with multiple smaller packages being tendered by Dubai municipality to contractors, so funded directly by Dubai municipality rather than on a PPP basis. But that is being done separately to the Dubai Strategic Sewage Tunnels project, just to clarify. So yes, Dubai is taking that very seriously and is investing billions in stormwater drainage as well, just not through PPP. Why is there no mention on district cooling projects? Well, yes, I think mainly because we've looked at a lot of the sort of bigger projects and district cooling tends to be a little bit smaller. But yes, district cooling is a very well-established model using PPP. There's a handful of players like MCool, Empower, and forget the names of some of the names of the other ones, but there are a handful of entities which operate district cooling facilities. It's just that it tends to be a small number of developers building them rather than it being much more open to other players. It tends to be a much more closed market in that respect. Right, I'm running out of time. We've already actually run out of time, so I'll just answer a couple more questions. Are there any specific examples of PPP projects in the urban rail sector? No, there hasn't been any rail projects until now procured on a PPP basis. Well, there aren't many rail or metro projects in general in the GCC, but the Q Express is the first one, and I expect it to pioneer that, and I expect to see future metro projects like the Mecca Metro, possibly the Jeddah Metro, possibly the Saudi Land Bridge being delivered on a PPP basis if it proves successful. Any update on Bahrain Metro? No, not really. It's been in the pipeline for a long time. There is a list already of pre-qualified PPP developer groups for that. There has been some announcements from Bahrain that they are still looking at it, that the route is being finalized, but no concrete developments on that. Of course, Bahrain and Qatar have reactivated the Friendship Bridge project between the two countries, the causeway. That could be on a PPP basis. And the King Hamad Causeway project between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, that could also be PPP as well. But we'll wait and see there. Okay, so we've got a question here about how to participate in MEED Projects Awards. So every year, MEED holds an awards ceremony for the best projects completed in the region over the previous 12, 18 months. It's the biggest projects awards show in the region, and it normally happens in November. The nomination process for submitting your nominations normally starts in the Q2. So watch this space, and during that time, you'll be notified of entries being open, and you'll be able to then submit your entry for your project and then be judged and potentially shortlisted for the finals in November. Final question I'll answer. In the power sector, what is the percentage of PPP projects versus EPC projects? Well, actually, the question, it depends on the segment. If it's talking about power generation, then almost all projects are now PPP. On the other hand, if you're talking about transmission and distribution, then almost all projects are on an EPC basis. So it depends. If you're talking downstream transmission and distribution, then it's EPC. If it's upstream power production, then it's going to be PPP. Thank you all for the kind messages about that, for everything today. Lots of questions about NEOM. NEOM, as I mentioned earlier, the line I see very, very problematic right now. But on the other hand, Trojena, Oxygen, I think are still proceeding. But as we know, the Giga Projects program in Saudi Arabia has slowed down quite dramatically over the last couple of years generally. But that's a presentation and a discussion for another day. We'll be doing a Giga Projects webinar later this year. But for now, thank you very much for your attention and your questions today and joining us. As I mentioned, this will be uploaded and up to YouTube over the next couple of days, and you should receive a PDF copy of this presentation in due course. That's it for the first webinar of the year. Join me next month, where we'll be doing a webinar on the data centers market, another fast-growing projects segment in the GCC. But for now, I just want to say thank you very much and see you all again soon. Thank you and bye-bye.